All right. Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to our webinar here. My name is Jack Hartwig, the marketing manager over here at the Berwin Group. Today, we have Lindsay Tate McDonald, our director of project revenue, and Dan Cook, our account manager. On the agenda, we're going to do a little refresher on what is CertiCensus and talk about really the why behind it. What is the purpose of it? We're going to give you a look at the portal and the reports that can come out of there due to popular demand for that visibility. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the administrative and participant impact that can have. Without further ado, though, I'll pass things off to our panel and we'll have Lindsay and Dan get us started.
Great. Thanks, Jack. We wanted to start with an introduction and/or a refresher. As Jack kind of earlier just said, a high level of what CertiCensus is. CertiCensus is our end-to-end solution that allows you to proactively manage your participant pool. CertiCensus takes our death audit, location of missing participants, and our beneficiary research products. We bundle them into the industry's only solution to solve the challenges faced during the life cycle of a participant. This applies to if a participant is active all the way to their payout status. The circular graphic you're looking at does an excellent job of highlighting how each of our solutions work together as one project, and by utilizing CertiCensus, you move away from reactive methods and become more proactive with your pension plans. This is achieved first by applying our industry-leading death audit, validation, and weekly reporting service to your population. It's important to remember, gone are the days when the death master file was the most reliable source. Before the fall of 2011, up to 98%, 99% of deaths, you could go to the death master file and you would find that date of death. You'd be able to then sort of work backwards to validate that. Since 2011, there's been legislation and laws passed. Many of you maybe on this webinar are aware of that, where state agencies and other agencies no longer had to report that information to the DMF. Since that, there's been a drastic decline in dates of death and the accuracy that you could pull from the death master file for confirming deaths. To just last year in 2023, that number was just 16% as far as kind of an accuracy that goes along with that. What that means is it's harder and more challenging to find and validate accurate dates of death for your participation plan. How CertiCensus solved this is the time your team spends managing a pension plan also has value. You save time with CertiCensus. Our solution uses human expertise to review and compare your data file, and then matches and validates using our database of over 27,000 sources, which allows the Berwin Group to lead the industry in providing up to 96% accuracy in our identification. Once a participant is identified as deceased, and if there's insufficient beneficiary data that you have, you can submit that participant to our BeneSearch service within your CertiCensus project. Our BeneSearch service and report will identify a potential spouse with up to 80% probability, and a first-degree relative with up to 95% probability. You'll receive a comprehensive report that includes the following information: confirmation of that participant in fact being deceased, and it's also a very important thing we know, the marital status and at time of death. We provide that back in our reporting to confirm whether that participant was divorced. You'll know the name and address of that spouse, relative, and if they're still living as well too, along with date of death and source. If a spouse is deceased, details or efforts to verify for auditing purposes, and if death audit is confirmed, links to those obituaries are also provided. One of the next phases included with CertiCensus is locating of missing participants and confirming that participant information. This is where CertiCensus takes the next step in being proactive for your population. We send out quarterly mailings throughout the year, so every effort is made to correct and update an address. Within a year, 1 in 8 participants are likely to move. How is that caught or updated? Without CertiCensus, that could be very challenging for your participation plan. We also find on average, nearly 33% of all participants have bad addresses on file when we review them and upload that file. That could mean a lot of important information that is never getting to those participants if you aren't using CertiCensus or some type of locate service that we use. The way CertiCensus helps with all these problems is we've essentially provided a best practice process to address missing participants. A few years ago, early in January of 2021, the Department of Labor released guidance for missing participants. This applies to plan sponsors with active defined contribution and defined benefit plans. Essentially, what we've done is we took our process, we incorporated those best practices to provide a timestamp audit trail of the steps taken and the outcome for each participant within CertiCensus. And a little bit more explained how exactly we are locating and confirming those participants. We do this through a multi-channel approach that includes up to 3 first-class mailings through the United States Postal Service and up to 2 outbound calls through our call center. Multiple efforts are then made each quarter to update and confirm your population's information whenever we see a discrepancy. Our locate process allows you to customize the reason text as to why we're reaching out on your behalf. This helps the end participant understand what and why an action is needed from them on your behalf. We also understand over time companies inherit or take over plans due to mergers or other business practices. Our locate process allows you to customize the workflow to, again, better help the end participant receiving that letter to help identify and relate what company they work for and if and when what benefit they have and what action they need to do to update that information. The proof is in our results, as we found on average, CertiCensus users are able to confirm 83% of their addresses with the Berwyn Group through our locate process, which again is done throughout the year. If and when we see a discrepancy, our process will know to kick in. We'll do our best efforts to make sure we go ahead and update that address. One of the next phases that's all-inclusive with CertiCensus project is 24/7 access to the latest reporting, which includes validated deaths, locate results on a weekly basis, along with if and when you do choose to use the beneficiary service. Once our team's able to validate that process, report those findings back to you, you'll be able to see any and all of the beneficiary reports within the CertiCensus. Along with, you'll also be able to do custom reporting. A little bit later on in this presentation, Lindsay's going to kind of show you exactly how that works. All of this allows for a comprehensive reporting and an audit trail. CertiCensus is a documented process of compliance. If and when the Department of Labor comes calling, everything that we provide for you within CertiCensus will really help show every effort we've reached and the outcome to try to kind of make sure to update that participant's information. And the last part with this circle graph is the participant communication. So along with all the services that CertiCensus does, the locate, the death audit, finding beneficiaries, and the reporting, that also ties into the participant communication. CertiCensus will send out an AFN, an annual funding notice, per calendar year for your CertiCensus project, where we'll manage the entire process, along with any return mail from an AFN, which mailing and tracking can be very expensive and time consuming. So this is another way that CertiCensus is going to allow your team to work more efficient. Jack, if you go ahead to the next slide. So why CertiCensus? There are many challenges pension plans faces. Common roadblocks you could come across are access to data and accuracy of that data. And if you and your team have a system in place and the team that's able to handle that workload with tracking down data, dates of death, updated information, beneficiaries, return mail, all that stuff is something that is very time consuming. And as I mentioned earlier, on average, we see 33% of participant files are in fact missing or need information. That could be some combination of social security numbers are missing, a first or last name is missing, there could be a date of birth or a part of an address missing. And what all that does is that leads to descendants are missed, overpayments could be made, participant contact information is incorrect, that required communication never gets to them, or beneficiary information is not up to date. By choosing CertiCensus, you are able to, being proactive is essential in maintaining accurate participant data. CertiCensus allows you to be proactive. Another reason why choosing CertiCensus, there could be a desperate sources that are used to update and validate participant information, which is time consuming and labor intensive manual work for you and your team. Our comprehensive solutions will yield better results and a better process for your team. Again, streamlining your process, taking the work from your team and allowing the Berwin Group to do that process for you and manage it. Another reason why you should choose CertiCensus, you very likely might have just gone through, or you might in the future have an audit by the Department of Labor requiring a documented process and due diligence reporting of how and what those processes are. You're maintaining your participant information. If you choose CertiCensus, you can check off that box. Feel confident you are meeting those guidelines with proof of our documented process on behalf of you and your participants. And one of the last reasons why you should choose CertiCensus, certainly in this day and age, it's understandable. Concerns could be have for sharing participant PII information with a variety of vendors. CertiCensus, again, helps streamline and have you become the best advocate for your plan participants by having CertiCensus do all of that work for you. We can validate the deaths, we can contact and find beneficiary information for you, provide that to you, and then we could also follow up with our locate process where we're doing the actual outreach, reporting, and tracking, and updating all of that client information for you. And Jack, if you could go ahead to the next slide, please. This next slide is sort of going to kind of show the process of how what happens. You sign a contract, you get onboarded by our client services team, and you submit that participant file. The first thing that'll happen is, go ahead, Jack, if you could click that, that'll immediately start kicking off our CertiDev death audit, where our team will start reviewing, validating, and monitoring any of those participants who we find a match for, providing that back to you on a weekly basis. And if you go ahead and click the next, Jack, thank you. If and when we do find anybody within the beneficiary research, if you don't have any up-to-date information on that beneficiary, if you so choose, you can go ahead and provide that within the portal. Lindsay's going to show you an example of how that works. Very easy and it's very user-friendly. You'll be able to then get all of that reporting we discussed earlier. If that participant was married, deceased, that status, and that participant information. Once that process happens, that then kicks over to the quarterly address verification. And that's really the main foundation of our locate process. From there, go ahead, Jack, if you could click that. That kicks off our locate process. Again, done 4 times a year. From that, those mailings are confirmed and updating participant information, which ties directly into the best address of contact of record, which we report back to you. And if you click that last part, Jack, that then ties into the annual funding notice. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we get the most accurate, up-to-date address of record. That then goes in to make sure the annual funding notice is getting to that correct address for that participant. And thanks, Jack. Just go to that last slide. So again, it's all about the participants. With over 30 years of this market experience, we fully understand the complexity of fiduciary responsibilities. CertiCensus makes it easier for you customers by understanding the ever-changing requirements and providing the data, tracking, and the answers needed, removing the work for you, our customers, letting us manage that process for you. What we're going to do now is transition this part into Lindsay, where she's going to demonstrate more detail the portal.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I'm going to be talking specifically about the portal itself, giving you guys a glimpse on what kind of reporting can be pulled out of there. I first wanted to talk just a little bit about just security in general, as it's always on kind of the top of our client's mind. So we utilize a web portal. We encrypt data that we receive in transit and in arrest status. The portal also supports additional encryption. If you would like that, we utilize PGP encryption, which is pretty common in the industry. So it's an additional layer of security that our clients can utilize if they wish to. It goes through sharing keys, like a key code between us and the client themselves. And so a file that we received will be encrypted status. We would have a key to unlock that. And then when we send back any reports to you, it would have that same encryption where you would also have a key to unlock that information. Certainly happy to discuss in that more in detail if that is something as an additional option that you would like set up on the account. Like Dan mentioned before, we also have access to this web portal and be able to pick up reports and get information anytime. So 24/7 online access. It also supports single sign-on if that's something of interest. And also multi-factor authentication is something that we always turn on for all of our clients, but it's an option you can opt out of if you want to. So really trying to make sure that we keep your data in the most secure state as possible at all times. Next slide. So very first step into the process is obviously getting a data file from the client. So let's talk about a few of the data points that's needed or required for the service. So participant social security number, first name, last name, date of birth, and last known address. Some clients decide to submit known deceased participants because they are missing that relative information that's needed to pay out benefits. There's also a column on the data file that allows you to provide a date of death if you already know that they're previously deceased and need that information. So you'll notice on your upload options, there's 3 different types of categories. So there's adding a record. So when you first start, you're going to be adding all new records, but certainly throughout the process, you are able to add participants at any given point in time. You can also remove participants. So example of why a client would want to remove a participant would be if we've already identified them as deceased, we've already provided back that relative information, there's not anything really to do as far as monitoring that participant. You can choose to remove that participant if you wish. You will not lose any historical data from that participant that we pulled before. So if they were part of any locate searches, if we've done any required mailings, all the death audit information. So all of that information stays in the portal. You're able to pull reports off of that, but we're not just actively monitoring that participant for any new information anymore. And then also you have the option to update any data that you wish. There's options to do this on a one-off basis through the portal, but if you had multiple participants in which maybe you didn't provide a date of birth before, maybe it was wrong, maybe a social security number was a digit off, something like that. Maybe the participant confirmed the address directly with you instead of calling through us. You are able to provide that updated information and provide it through a file if that's easier to do so. All right, next slide. All right, so here's the dashboard of our portal. So once we receive your file and get started with the service, this is a glimpse of what this could look like as a high level when you first log in. So you'll notice the top of the dash is some stats. So you can see right off the bat, how many participants are we currently monitoring? You can also see if you had removed any participants previously, you'll have the number of how many you've removed. You also see how many deaths that we verified from your participants, how many addresses we have confirmed. If you do utilize the required mailing, like Dan said, that could be in the form of an annual funding notice, but it doesn't always have to be. Some clients have a SAR notification. Some is just an annual notification at some point in time. So it doesn't just have to be an AFN. It's any required mailing that you may have. We cover once a year. This will give you kind of the total number of required mailings that we have made in this specific example that we're showing. It's been multiple years, and so you'll see kind of that population double in size, and that's the reason for that number. And then any relatives that we've reported based off deceased participants, you can see how many beneficiaries have been reported as well. So now we're going to dive into each pie chart just because there's a lot going on with each different category. So the first pie chart is about our deceased participants. And you notice there's a couple different statuses here. So we have an SSA reported death, meaning Social Security Administration is where that source has come from. We have a Berwyn source, and so this is data that's unique to Berwyn. So that's our obituaries and any state information that we purchase. We have a client reported. So like I previously talked about in an example, if when we receive your file and you have known deceased participants and you included them, those can be classified as a client reported death if we didn't have an additional death record to back that up. Or, you know, sometimes relatives or beneficiaries contact you directly. and you can report participants as deceased to us, and they may fall into that client reported bucket. And then the last one is a relative reported, which we find is really interesting. And so we've talked about through our locate process, when a participant can be flagged to be eligible to be part of a locate process where we're making outreach to those participants to confirm their address. Typically, those notifications and those letters are all sent to living participants only, right? We're not trying to confirm any deceased participants' address information. We have found that at times when we're trying to confirm somebody that we assume is living, they actually have passed away. We didn't have an obituary or a state or an SSA reported death to back that up. And so on the bottom of each letter that we send out, there's actually a section on those letters that state, if this participant that we mail to is deceased, please let us know and report that back to us. And so we gather the date of death. We gather the information that about the person that filled out that form, so their name, how they're related to that participant, their address, information like that, and we'll report to that way. And so when we talk about our death audit, is our CertiDeath audit that comes with CertiCensus, and we talk a lot about having 95% coverage. CertiCensus actually takes that up a notch. We find an additional 1 to 2% of additional deceased participants through this locate element of CertiCensus. So that gets us back to that 96.5, 97% coverage of all recent deaths. Next slide, or next pie chart. Thank you. And so here we come to our address confirmations. Again, a few different statuses that we're going to talk about here. So a confirmed address in the confirmed section can mean one of two things. Like I mentioned before, when we receive your data file, we ask for the last known address that you have on file. And we're monitoring that on a quarterly basis. We do these address checks to see if the address that you have provided has changed at any point in time. Once we notice a description in the address that you provide and versus what we are seeing through, those participants get kicked off into a locate search, which how Dan mentioned before. It's outreach that we are doing to try to confirm that address. We do that outreach through letters. We send out up to 3 letters, and we also do it through outbound phone calls. So once we make contact with a participant through that locate process and they confirm their address, they get put into that confirmed status. The other way that's identified as confirmed is if the address that you provided on your file and what is showing still as current through commercial databases matching, we consider that also a confirmed status. We can see that they're still living at that address that you have provided to us in your file. The next status we can see is in progress. And so this is going to, once a participant has been flagged for having a different address than what you provided, and we talk about how they go through a locate process. That locate process is about 12 to 14 weeks of us making active communication to your participants through those letters and those phone calls. And so in progress means we have started that locate search for them, but they have not yet confirmed their address within that 12 to 14 week time frame. So they're considered just an in progress, letting you know we're communicating with them. They just haven't updated their address as of yet. And then we have paused, which means that 12 to 14 week process of outreach has come to an end. Not forever, but they go into a pause status because each participant is eligible for that in-depth locate search once per year. And so that doesn't mean that they can't communicate back to us and confirm their address at any point in time. It just means that we're not actively sending letters or making phone calls at that particular point in time. Once participants confirm their address, you can see that in progress and pause status change. This is all in real time. So you'll see those numbers constantly go down throughout the year as participants are coming in. They don't always contact us within that 12 to 14 week period. Some participants take 3 months, 6 months, up to a year. It's really kind of on their time frame whenever they get around to opening their mail and responding. And then the last status is removed. As we talked about before, you are eligible to remove participants as you wish. And we just want to have an indicator in there so you can see when something has been removed and be able to pull reports on that. And the last pie chart is around our required mailings. Like I mentioned before, that can be in the form of an annual funding notice. It can be a SAR mailing. It can be some sort of just a notification, a blast notification you wanted to send out to each participant. So this is just a status on how many have been sent, the dates that they mailed. If any of them have come back as non-deliverable, we track that too as well, so you can pull reporting on that. If we do receive any non-deliverable mail, those participants are automatically kicked over to a locate search so we can get that updated as soon as possible. You'll also notice on each pie chart, there's this little blue arrow off to the side. That's an option that you can pull reports at any given time by pressing those arrows. It'll download a report that's very specific to either that required mailing or that locate process or that death audit. So it's one way to easily pull a report if you need a consolidated report like that. All right, Jack, can go back. And then the last thing on this dashboard you'll notice is the quick view. This is all the weekly reports, the last weekly reports that we have reported to you. So within any given week, you'll receive up to 3 different types of reports. You'll get your death audit report, so any new participants that we've identified as deceased in that given week. A locate report, so any participants that we have confirmed new address information for within that week. And then a relative report, so anybody that's been previously reported as deceased that you send off to needing relative information, we'll report that back to you within the week as well. All right, Jeff, next screen. All right, so let's dive in. We're going to talk about other types of reporting, but we're going to dive in. If you wanted to look at just a very specific participant record, you're able to do that through the portal as well. So we're going to look at an example of a living participant. We'll look at an example of a deceased participant as well. So this is participant details on a living participant. You can see at the very top all the basic information. So their name, their date of birth, the current address that they're living at, phone numbers, email addresses. You'll notice on this specific example, you'll see some exclamation marks next to the phone numbers and email addresses. That's data that we are pulling in, but has not yet been confirmed by the participant themselves. Participants have lots of different options on ways to contact us to confirm their address information. So they can either return the bottom portion of the letter that we sent out, they can call into our call center, and we have also an online portal that they can log into. Each letter that we send out has a unique reference number and letter ID code. So if they plug those numbers in successfully, they can get access into a portal, which asks them for this additional information besides their address, their phone numbers, their email addresses. Our call center, if they call into the call center, is usually always asking for the phone number as well. You'll see those statuses change, that exclamation mark go to like a green check mark if we've also confirmed with the participant themselves a phone number or an email address. So one thing just to be conscious of. Below that, you'll see the address history. So we can see on this particular example that this participant is currently in progress of a locate search. And the reason why that they're in progress is we can see right below that the required mailing that was sent out was actually returned to us as deliverable. So that automatically kicked this participant into a locate search. And so you're going to see what was originally on your file as an address, and then once we confirm an address with a participant, you'll see that status of current address locate in progress change with the address that's confirmed, and then the confirmed date in which that participant contacted us and confirm that information. You can also see there's some radio buttons kind of at the top. So we'll talk about a little bit what that means. You're able to add relative information that you have on file. If you want all your data in one place within this portal, you can do that. So at any point in time, if you wanted to add relative information, you can do that. You can edit participant information. We talked a little bit previously. You can do that by uploading a file if you have multiple participants that you needed to edit information for, or you can do that one-off at a time if you like. Example I gave is if a participant contacted you directly instead of notifying us through like a letter or the self-report portal or the call center, if they've changed their address, you can go in here and update that right away. You can also download this specific participant information. They have multiple ways on how to download that data. It could be an Excel, CSV, PDF form, however you want to see that. You can also report this participant as deceased. So let's say a relative contacted you before we had a chance to report through one of our sources. You can go in there and put that information. It's going to ask you what the date of death is, how you heard of this information, so how was it reported to you. You'll also have the option, if you would like us to continue to back that up with finding a death record, so either an obituary, an SSA, or a state reported death, we can continue to look at that so you have an additional information to back up that information that was reported to you. Or you can decide, nope, that was good enough for me. I have everything I need. We'll go ahead and close that record, not remove the record, but just close it, which just means we're not actively looking for a death record for that particular participant any longer. All right, Jack, next one. All right, and this is what it looks like participant specific on a deceased participant. So again, at the top, you're going to have all the basic details that we've gathered. So if they were part of, if we've done locate information on them before, so they'll show their current address, any emails, phone numbers, anything like that that we've retrieved. You're also going to see now there's a date of death that is populated in there. You're going to see the validated death record. So how was this participant reported? In this specific example, it was an obituary reported death. And we give you the URL right there so that you can view that obituary if you need to. This particular participant also has been kicked off to have relative information retrieved. And so on here, you can see all the different names of the relatives that we've identified, their current address information, their date of birth, what's the relationship. So you can see the top one, spouse and children that we've identified, phone numbers, and then the source of the relative information. So this one came from a Benny search. Some other sources would be such as a client reported relative, how I talked about that we could add relatives in there if you'd like to. So you would see the status being client reported instead of Benny search. The other status could be the relative report through that locate mailing. So you can see that status as a relative reported information in there as well. Again, you have the options to downloading this participant detailed records, editing this record if you needed to, but all the information is there on that specific participant as you need it. Okay, next one. All right, we talked about sending relatives. Once a participant has been flagged as deceased, you have the option to send off to for a relative search. We recognize some clients need this information for all their participants. Sometimes they just need it for some of their participants. So they might have incomplete or old relative information. So you really control when you want to retrieve that information or not. So you can see there's a bunch of different statuses here at the top. So you can see all your participants. You can see a beneficiary search status, meaning are they eligible to be sent to a relative search? And the eligibility flag is just, are they deceased or are they not? So you'll see ineligible, you'll see in progress. So if you've already sent that deceased participant to a relative search, it'll be in progress until you receive your results back. And then you'll see ineligible just only because they were or still living. You also see, oh, sorry, one last thing. And to send anybody that is eligible to be sent to a relative search, all you do is you can check the box to the left of their name, and you can send those over. You can send them one at a time. If there's also a checkbox towards the top that'll flag anybody that's eligible, and you can send anybody that's deceased that's eligible for a relative search all at one time if you would like to. You also see other statuses for your participants. So you've got your life status, your address verification status, your required mailing status, when that last required mailing was sent. If they were deceased, you'll see the date of death there right up the top for you. All these, you'll see these little 3 dots next to each kind of status at the top. They're all filterable. So you can sort all this by alphabetical. You can put it on a filter there to search just anybody that's deceased, anybody that's living, anybody that's having a confirmed address versus removed. On your file format that you send to us, there's client use columns there as well. So sometimes there's unique identifiers that you utilize for each participant, or maybe they're in different groups. Maybe they're actives versus retirees or term vested or something like that. You can also pull client use in here as a filterable option. So there's a lot of ways to view this data. This is just a very basic view. So you can really change and customize the information that you want to see through this portal as well. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about reporting a little bit. And so on the dashboard, I mentioned that you have reports that are automatically sent to you. So the end of every week, you can receive up to 3 reports that are sent to you: the death audit, the locate, and the relative one. Those are available on your dashboard up until the next weeks are posted there. Otherwise, if you want to see any historical reports that we've posted, you're able to do that as well. You can go in here, you can see the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You can filter it by, I just want to see the locate reports or just all the death reports. You can do that as well. You are also able to create custom reports if we want to go to the next slide here. And so this could be more, you know what, I want to see all reports within a specific time range for a specific, so I want to see all deaths from the start of my service to the end of my service. You're able to do that as well. And for any category, the locate, the required mailings, the relatives, you can do all of that, customize date range, what kind of information you want to see. If you want to see a report on everything that is up to date, we call that an audit report. I think that's the next slide here, Jack. Perfect. And so an audit report is going to be everything that was done from the start of your service until the second that you run that report. And so this is just a very small glimpse of some of the information that are in some of these reports. You can see there's some charts on here on just kind of around the age of your population, who's living, who's deceased, that kind of thing. And then towards the bottom, you can see this is a very detailed report, and it has multiple different types of tabs of data that's on that report. And so you have an overview, which is what this chart is, information. You have all your confirmed address information for your participants. And so you can kind of see a little glimpse of that towards the top. And so we'll have the name that you submitted, the name that the participant confirmed when they confirmed their address, the address that they confirmed their address at, if we've received a phone number or an email address on there. You also get the date of the last death audit that was performed, the address retrieval, when we pulled that address to kick them off to a locate search. So a lot of detailed information all around the confirmation of address information in here. You also can see required mailing dates and stuff like that in here. The locate in progress. So we talked about what in progress means. So those are participants that we've noticed there's a discrepancy in their address. We've kicked them off to a locate search, but they have not yet confirmed their address in with us. So we call that a locate in progress status. You are able to see at any point in time where they're at in that process. So you get all the address information that we've mailed to, the dates that we've mailed to them, phone numbers that we've retrieved, dates that we've made those phone calls, what happened in each scenario. Same thing with the addresses. Was it returned or non-deliverable? On the phone calls, did we leave a message? Was it a wrong phone number? All that very specific detailed information, time stamped, so you can see all the efforts that have been taken thus far to locate that participant. You also get a deceased report, so consolidated death audit report of all your participants that we found a death record for or an obituary, the date of death, what date was that death audit performed, what was the source of the death, so if it was an obituary or a state or an SSA reported death. If it's an obituary, we're going to provide you the link, the URL to that obituary, so you can go and view that yourself if you need to. You have consolidated relative report, which is that beneficiary tab. That is all the relative information that we've reported to you up until that point. Our relative report is a very extensive report. Dan mentioned before, 80% of the time we are finding a spouse for you. And not even just if there was a spouse. We're letting you know if they were married at the time of death or not. If they were, who is the spouse, their contact information. We also let you know if we believe that if the spouse is alive or deceased. If we find that they're deceased, we're providing a date of death for that spouse as well. All the other, and then I believe it's 95% of the time we're providing first degree relatives as well. So siblings, parents, children, again, all their address information, their phone numbers, their dates of birth, everything you need to contact them. And so you have all of that relative information consolidated on one report as you need it. And then the last tab is that required mailing tab. So who are all the participants that received a required mailing? What date was it sent? Did it come back as non-deliverable or not? If you've been on the service for multiple years, you're going to see those categories for each year of the service, right? So it's not just the last moment in time or the last time we did it. You get a consolidative every time that we did those searches and what happened. All right, next slide. All right, so now I'm going to kick it back over to Dan here. That will go over a few more slides for you.
Thanks, Lindsay. And what we want to discuss next here, as you can see, we want to talk about some of our clients' favorite components with CertiCensus. And I think one of the most important things to take away from these 5 bullet points and some of these bullet points is, again, this is everything working together. This isn't individual ad hoc services where once a year we do our address search, then a couple months later, maybe before the end of the year, we do our death audit search. That's not how CertiCensus works. CertiCensus does all that throughout the year on a weekly basis. And highlighting some of those aspects, as you could see, the death audit and locate synergy. We find up to 96% of descendants. We identify that with very high visibility of accuracy. Following up with that, you could see in the lower right corner the accuracy with our report. So with the death audit and locate together, very high value of finding deceased, and then we have a very high and positive response rate for our location process. 83% of participants confirm their address through our process, 62% of those through our locate letters. So we know that letter is getting to that end user, and they're in return making that action, sending that back so we can update that accurate information and report that back into you folks, which ties into our comprehensive reporting. That 24/7 access aligns with DOL guidelines for your missing participants. You'll feel more secure with the CertiCensus reporting process. And with the obituary copies, one of the things our clients love, you see what we see. This allows your team to essentially see how we piece the puzzle together, and that in turn provides you the most accurate and up-to-date results on if and when a participant is deceased. And lastly, the Benny search. We know it's hard to find and maintain information. There sometimes always are those participants that just seem a little bit difficult to confirm. If that's the case with Benny search, CertiCensus is going to help you find those. And again, everything is happening in one project. Okay, Jack. And I'll sort of kind of give this the high level, and I'll let you folks sort of kind of read this and understand this. And I think the most important thing to take from this when you're reading this is that in just the first 3 months, this is what we were able to find for that participant. So yes, CertiCensus goes throughout the year. It's a year-long project, a year-long process with lots of moving pieces, all different times throughout the year. But one of the great things is you can get immediate results. As we mentioned earlier, once you get signed on, you get onboarded, that file gets updated. Within the next week or so, those validations are going to start getting reported back to you. Obviously, depending on that file size, you're going to immediately be able to start seeing results. And as you can take from here, that client was able to do that. More than 2% of missing participants were deceased, immediately making them stop overpayments and saving money in that month. That's the real-time results that CertiCensus does deliver. And then just underscoring the impact that you see here. The importance of having death audit and locate solutions working together. That death audit and locate synergy that we showed before. And again, seamless reporting for peace of mind. And again, just some more slides here. I won't read each of these for you, but again, I think it's important to see what our clients are saying. This is real impact that we've been able to do with this product that in turn makes your participant plan run more efficiently, and it makes a better process and experience for that end participant. And with that, I'll kick it back to Lindsay and Jack. We could start here with some questions if time remaining.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you so much, Dan and Lindsay, for walking us through that. We did have some questions come in during the presentation that are good to address here. Lindsay, Dan, I don't know who wants to take this one, but this is a good point to clarify this. You know, when it comes to that required mailing, for example, that annual funding notice, would you mind clarifying, you know, we are actually sending that on behalf of the plan. We can all, you know, we also do the cleanup before, but it's really ultimately up to the client, correct?
Right. So yeah. So a lot of times, so we say required mailing because it's one mailing that's basically the same mailing for all your participants. So not anything that's including like detailed financial information or anything. That's why it usually looks in the form of an annual funding notice or a SAR mailing, because that's kind of a general notification mailing. We are sending that on behalf of the client. And so how that looks like, we're constantly doing the updating locate address information throughout the year. So you should have good address information and send that mailing. But there's a section of the portal where you can actually upload whatever that notification is. We'll just call it an AFN for this example, where you're loading that notification to us. Most of the times we see that it's around the April timeframe. And we require about 2 weeks notice to actually receiving whatever the notification that you want sent out. So a lot of those AFNs have like a due date by, you know, April 30th or so. They need to be actually physically mailed by that date. So whatever that date that you're looking for, that required notification date that you need to send it out by, we just ask that you upload that documentation about at least 2 weeks before that due date. And then we'll actually mail that notification to each one of your living participants that's in your population. We can manage, you know, we understand that there could be a couple different versions of an AFN we've discovered throughout. We've been on CertiCensus for a couple of years now. So there might be just like one AFN that goes out to the entire population, but there may be 2 or 3 different versions of that. We can handle multiple versions. We just don't want to it just can't be participant specific. So each mailing is unique to that participant. They kind of have to be grouped in some sort of fashion.
Awesome. That is wonderful. Another question is, you know, we said reported death is through SSA. Do we have access to SSA directly?
So we have access to what's called the public DMF. And so as Dan mentioned before, 2011 is kind of really the targeted time frame when everybody had access to the DMF, public DMF before. It included almost all reported deaths. I think it still wasn't even perfect. I think it was like 98% or something around those lines of all recent reported deaths was reported through the DMF. And so death information was readily available. Now it's a very different story with it all the way down. Every single year it declines farther and farther. I think we're sitting at around about 13% now of all deaths reported are coming from this public DMF. So it's not, we don't have access to, there's a public version and then there's like the SSA, like directly into the SSA. Very limited people have access to that full DMF. I think it's only like specific government agencies. And so what we utilize now is we purchase directly from the states that allow us to. And then we also utilize obituaries to find out a lot of death information. Using the death audit service alone, so we talk about CertiDeath as an element of the CertiCensus, utilizing that alone as your death audit gets you about 95% of all current death information. Paired with CertiCensus, where we pull in the locate elements, and I talked a little bit about finding additional 1 to 2% of deaths through that locate mailing process, you're getting about 96.5 to 97% of all death information. So really, highest level percentage of death information that you can receive is through CertiCensus.
Awesome. Let me just look through the questions here. Do we have issues with address abbreviations ever? Depending on the state, boulevard is not acceptable versus boulevard spelled out, which the participant wrote. How do we handle those abbreviations, I guess?
So we can handle any abbreviation. So I'm going to take this in 2 different ways. So if you submitted a file with like an abbreviated address, we can manage that. It may get flagged as having like a better address, in which case we'd send them through a locate search. We'd update the address to whatever the USPS standard is. So not an issue for us to manage an abbreviated street address or anything like that. That's fine.
Perfect. And then for those mailings, how is postage handled for all of that? Is that passed on through, or
No, it's part of the service. So you get a flat fee per record based on how many participants you are submitting to the service. And so that comes with everything that we talked about here. So there is no additional cost for our postage or anything like that. It's all included in the service.
Great. Next question, can we get exports PDF of all sent out letters and call notes for our electronic record system? This would help to place a copy of communications documentation in member records.
Okay. Yeah, we don't, currently as it stands, we do not provide PDF copies of the letters themselves, like each specific letter that was sent out. But what we do is you actually have the ability to create that letter. So you're creating a template of the letter that is being sent to your participants. Through the portal is actually where you create this letter. We give you a standard template. You're able to make some adjustments, such as Dan talked about a work for name, which is the company name or a plan name that participant's going to recognize. And then there's some language in there. The first paragraph is what we call the reason of the letter. And that is everything that you can customize with it. So you can make up your complete reason if you want. We usually keep it pretty general because it has to be a similar message that's going out to all these participants that you're trying to confirm or update your records, trying to keep your locate record information up to date. And so you can download that template, that approved template at any point in time, and just know that we are utilizing the name and addresses are plugging into that, kind of like a mail merge, if you will. So at any point in time, you can download the template that we're using. It's always live and posted for you. You can change that template anytime you want to. You really can customize the letters and whatever you want to, but we are not providing like the specific letter, PDF letter that was mailed to each one of the participants. But that's really good feedback. We're always looking to see ways that we can improve the service. That's the first time I've had a client ask for that specifically, but definitely something that we would consider taking in, or something that we'd consider taking in and making improvement if that's what clients are needing. So
great. And then, what is the easiest way for someone to actually get started on CertiCensus?
Yeah, so the best way is probably, so there's a couple of things you can do. Certainly throw it in the chat box that you would like to be contacted. After this webinar, Jack talked about there's a chat box. Obviously, submit your questions and comments. Let us know if you would like to be contacted. We can reach out to you. We have a help inbox, I think. Is there a slide, a contact us slide? I don't know if we put it on the webinar, but we can certainly put information in there. Perfect. The help at Berwyn group. Send an email on over there that you would like to be contacted to talk more about CertiCensus, and we'll reach out to you and give you all the information that you need.
Perfect. That is wonderful. And then just we're getting right up to time here. I know some of you are still posting questions, and we will certainly follow up with you individually. But Dan, Lindsay, anything that you'd want to add? Because we get this question a lot around the DOL guidelines for missing participants. We covered quite a bit of it in this presentation, but any final notes to add in regards to that?
I don't think anything necessarily. I mean, we can go kind of back over, but a lot of these locate elements was really designed around that FAB that Dan was talking about before, that DOL provided as recommendations. And the thing is, we talk to clients all the time about this and what the DOL is looking for, and there is not 100% one way to follow to make sure that you're covered, right? The DOL doesn't say follow steps 1, 2, and 3 and you're good, right? They are a bunch of recommendations. And so we really try to cover as many of those recommendations as we possibly can through CertiCensus and the locate element of the service, which is using a commercial data vendor, really tracking the efforts. So when we talk about pulling reports and seeing, specific addresses and dates that they were mailed, making sure that you have a very well documented process is covered by this. There's elements of, we didn't talk about it specifically, but social media searches, right, is something that we do as part of this. We're not specifically making outreach through social media, but we do provide the links. We put emphasis on Facebook and LinkedIn. Provide that information if that was another way that you wanted to attempt to reach out. So there's many, we can send out additional information to you specifically if you're looking at, but we do have charts on exactly kind of what were the recommendations by the DOL and what does the locate service cover, and check the box off. Thank
you, Dan and Lindsay, for walking us through CertiCensus, and thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days and joining us here. So just thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.